right, and we are back here on this special episode commemorating the Evil Dead franchise on the Cackling Jack podcast. Thank you for giving us a listen for our first part of this episode where we looked at Evil Dead 1. Now we get to look at the even crazier Evil Dead 2. And Lindsay actually has a question that I think would be interesting to discuss for this part of the film, or this part of the episode. Go ahead, Lindsay. Tell us what's been on your mind since what's been on your mind since Saturday.
Oh, so many things. Just kind of like, what? And like, he goes back to the same house, right?
Okay. All right. I kind of figured this is where it was going.
He basically put himself in the exact same situation that got him in trouble the first time. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, did the first movie not happen? Like,
that I'll definitely. I can understand you coming into this. I mean, you're basically new to the series. You have a blank slate, so I can understand that.
Yeah.
Here's why that was. The original, the first Evil Dead was under ownership of New Line Cinema. When they were making the sequel, it wasn't going to be under New Line, so New Line said, no, you can't use any of the footage from the original film. So what you see from the very beginning up until when Ash is propelled through the woods, that is all supposed to be like an abbreviated recap of the first film. Once Ash flies through the forest and hits the tree, that is where Evil Dead 2 begins.
Wow.
Which is funny because that kind of started, and I understand that there's, a legal and a business reason for this, but it really started to set a tone that the rest of the series kind of just went with, which is that it's one of the tightest series in the world in that every next episode, every next film, or every next part of the TV show, when we get to that, starts at the exact moment the last did. So Evil Dead 1 ends with Ash. He's about to escape, the sun's coming up, and then the killer flying squirrel monster gets him. And that's the end of it. And then Evil Dead 2 opens, as Max says, after a quick, odd recap, which I'll get to, with Ash being knocked down and possessed. But then the son gets rid of the possession so that he can go another night round for round with the demons in the cabin. It starts at the exact moment, but not before it stops and then changes the whole damn backstory to cut out all the other characters except his girlfriend. And they'll do this again, over and over, where it's the most faithful series in that it just continues on where the last one left off, so it's a really true sequel.
Right.
But they just change a bunch of crap anyway, and they just kind of rewrite the last episode to do whatever they want to do this time. So it becomes this series where, I think Mac and I were talking about this before we started, it becomes like that opening monologue from the beginning of Rubber. And it helps to accept this because half the things that happen, maybe more than half in the series, happen for no reason.
Why can't we see the air all around us? No reason. Why are we always thinking? No reason. Why do some people love sausages and other people hate sausages? No fucking reason.
For no reason.
Yeah, they filmed it this way. No reason. Why does the gun appear and then disappear? No reason. Why can't they possess him now when they possessed him before?
No reason.
No reason.
Why doesn't the chainsaw ever run out of fuel? No reason.
No reason.
Yes. How did he, the chainsaw is magically attached to my hand now, and there's no logistical problems of it falling off and because it's not attached very well, or you know what I'm saying? It works perfectly. And he is just all of a sudden totally cool with having a chainsaw for an arm, and it's like, okay, dude. I liked that part, was badass. So I loved it. It was so cool. But that was probably the only part of this whole franchise that I kind of knew about in the back of my head somewhere. Oh yeah, chainsaw arm. There it is. But yeah, it was okay.
What I love with the chainsaw, it was like they were making, they made Evil Dead 1 without the, the whole plans of, looking down the road, at least as far as I know, to the sequels and the importance of the chainsaw. And yet they would like focus in on the chainsaw at those moments when he strapped his girlfriend down to the table and he was going to cut her in half with the chainsaw, and it like zooms in on the chainsaw. It's like, it's here. And, after seeing the sequels, you're like, there's the chainsaw. But, when you first see it, you don't, for some reason it has this moment of importance, and with the zooming in the original. And of course, later we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But, did they have that plan in the beginning to have sequels with the chainsaw being almost a character?
I doubt they didn't expect to make a sequel after the first Evil Dead movie with the way it ended, but somehow that movie made so much money that they realized, you know what? Let's make another one. It's like,
yeah, the chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's like Excalibur with fuel.
That's a really good, connection given the end of Evil Dead 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because, like Mac, as you said, these legal issues and the fact that they had to kind of redo all this and they couldn't use other shots. I don't know why his girlfriend's name is Linda, and I don't know why they recast Linda twice when she has 10 minutes of screen time, but whatever. The rest of it,
Denise Bixler, I thought she was awesome as Linda, especially when she's evil. She really doesn't hold back when she's attacking Ash. She really lets loose, and I think it's wonderful when she does.
Yeah, I think that's what we're getting from both of these first two movies, is needs more Linda.
Yeah.
More Linda. She should have survived.
But the way that they keep messing with the timeline and the way that they just play fast and loose with the plot, I don't know, for me, it helped me kind of accept that they were going to play fast and loose with everything. Like physics, no reason. Logic, no reason. Things happening, these have these powers, these don't. You can hurt this with no reason. We just wanted to film this because it looked funny.
Why does the lamp have a Popeye laugh? No reason.
No reason. So that kind of worked in their favor for what they wanted to do. It was kind of funny.
And in the context too of other horror movies at the time, this was at the point in the 80s when horror and comedy were really starting to be blended together more frequently. You had Return of the Living Dead. You had Reanimator, Chud, Night of the Creeps, Monster Squad, Fright Night. All of these movies that are now seamlessly blending horror and comedy into one. So maybe it was really more about changing the franchise with the times, keeping it fresh instead of trying to keep it a straight horror movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that I'm wondering how much credit to give Raimi for this, because obviously, especially the second movie, where the wackiness and the gonzo-ness and the slapstick gets turned up to, it's past 11. It's up to like 15. Spinal Tap could not do this. And I'm wondering how much credit to give it for propelling this, or was it riding the wave? Because you're right, Mac, all these things were kind of happening at the same time, and that's another one is Reanimator, which I haven't seen in years, but I loved, which is another, it's a straight-up Lovecraft story retold as gory slapstick. And again, Peter Jackson had already done Dead Alive, which was the crazy, gory zombie comedy slapstick thing. So who had this idea? Because it's kind of this combination of exploitation elements and low-budget horror elements and Three Stooges Hollywood elements. Where did this come from? And how much was Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead pioneering this? And how much were they just kind of, I don't know, perfecting it?
I want to say they pioneered it with Evil Dead 1 because, let's face it, there was just so much absurdity in that movie. And then you had, I'm trying to think what was going on in the early 80s, because I can't really think of a lot of, Ghostbusters was 1984, and that was probably the most high-profile horror comedy mix that there was. And
right, and Reanimator was right after that, so the schlock was following quickly. So this, and just for context, Evil Dead 1, I guess it was finished in 79.
It was released in 1983, was when it came out.
Okay, I have some other sources that listed as 1981, but whenever it first popped out, that was the beginning of the 80s. And then by the time they got to Evil Dead 2, all these other films had been made. So this was 1987, I think it came out, 87, 88.
Yeah, yep.
So, yeah, you're right. All these other slapstick, gory, kind of commenting on horror, but putting in kind of a mainstream comedy vibe, happened in between. So, Mac, as far as you know, did Evil Dead kick this off?
I want to say that it had a big hand in it because if you want to discuss horror comedies, then you have to go all the way back to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But as far as the horror comedy that we know through like the over the top gore and blood, I would say that yes, Evil Dead pioneered it, and then you had Evil Dead 2, which mastered it.
Yeah, because they were kind of coming back to something that they'd started, and then all these other really creative teams had a lot of success with, and then that kind of explains it why they went to 15, because they were trying to not only top themselves, but top the people trying to top them. It was a conversation at that point. A very wacky, gory conversation.
And I brought this up on Saturday, but I had the pleasure of seeing the Siskel and Ebert review of Evil Dead 2, and the sound that they made when I told them that Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel liked the movie, that kind of threw them off. Because especially Roger Ebert, who took a liking to it because he realized that the violence was over the top and he got a good laugh out of it. But then, much like we discussed with Evil Dead 1, Roger Ebert noticed that there were touches here and there that showed Sam Raimi's love of older cinema or respect for older cinema. The scene with his dead dancing girlfriend, Roger Ebert made that connection to Fred Astaire. Which
and actually, for the audience, this is actually one of my favorite sequence in the whole movie, which is saying something, is when Linda, his girlfriend from the first movie, as Sherry, I believe, said, he couldn't chop her up. He took the chainsaw. He knew that he had to dismember the possessed so that they couldn't hurt anyone because the demons would just keep coming. But he couldn't dismember his girlfriend because he schmoopily liked her so much in that one nice scene in the entire franchise. So he just buried her. So, of course, she comes back from the dead in this one and comes in to torment and beat the hell out of him. And there's this really great stop-motion scene where she first comes out of the grave, and it's the actress's head just kind of giggling and giving the Joker grin on this decayed body that's doing this really cool dance scene in kind of a pre-Nightmare Before Christmas kind of scene.
When she pirouettes, the head stays in place.
Yes.
And here's a little bit of trivia for you. The guy who did the stop motion for that scene, he would later do stop motion for Davy and Goliath.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
You know what Davy and Goliath is, Mike? Because I did not know before.
I do. Mac, you want to give a quick synopsis? I'm still bug-eyed over here, realizing that.
I told him that Davy and Goliath, it was Christian television where a boy and his talking dog would learn biblical life lessons.
And it was all stop motion.
It's just bizarre.
Yeah, and I looked it up, as a lot of people did, because it had a bunch of famous parodies where, you know, they do it on sketch comedy shows where Goliath the dog would tell Davy, the innocent Christian boy, you know, life lessons and what to do and how to handle problems. And of course, in the parodies, the dog was always secretly the devil and was telling him to bury his sister.
Kill him, Davy.
Or burn down the candy
It's scary.
The matches, Davy.
It's very Summer of Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people.
But Mac, you're saying he worked on the straight version.
Yes, he worked on the serious. No, he never worked on the parodies. He worked on the serious Davy and Goliath, and then he worked on Evil Dead 2.
Wow.
That's insane.
That's a change.
Okay, going back on topic, this was the movie that actually referred to the Book of the Dead as the Necronomicon. It was, in the first one, it was the Nocturnum de Monto, but this is the first time they actually used Necronomicon to refer to the book.
Yeah, and actually, I know, I'll shut up for a little while after this, but that was something that really interested me when it first came on, because I remembered that, you know, there were lots of shout-outs. Like we said, he was referencing Wes Craven movies, and he's referencing Three Stooges bits, and, you know, there's lots of references in this. So the fact that he uses the H.P. Lovecraft evil book name for his evil book of spells name. It was probably just one more thing because what was it? They called it naturum. I don't even know if this is real Latin. Does anyone know if this is real Latin? You know, naturum demonto, the nature of demons. And that's what it was called in the first one. It was kind of generic, but then from that point on, they called it the Necronomicon Des Mortis, which always amused the living hell out of me because they said that was Book of the Dead. And of course, H.P. Lovecraft, when he made up the name Necronomicon, he was bullshitting. It was fakey Latin, and he meant that to mean the Book of Dead.
It's like J.K. Rowling kind of Latin.
Right, exactly.
So it's Latin words together.
Yeah. So what they end up with when they call it the Necronomicon Des Mortis is the Book of Dead Names of the Dead, or the Book of the Dead of the Dead of the Dead. So it's just fakey Latin building on other fakey Latin that means the same thing by another guy, which was pretty funny. But what's interesting, and I think, Sherry, you and I had talked about earlier this week, was that in The Evil Dead, this is just fun trivia, but they use it as a spell book, right? You say the wrong spell from the book, you speak the wrong words from the book, and it summons these demons from hell, and they run loose and possess everybody.
Yeah.
But then you can say other words from the book and a different spell, and you can banish them, or you can make a time warp, or you can exorcise them, or you do this.
Right, and that's they do that in Evil Dead 2 and 3.
Right, and in Evil Dead 2 especially, the whole conflict in the end, the way that they resolve it is another meat train of characters we'll never use again comes in. And
these characters are far more interesting. I love the redneck Danny Hicks character. I thought he was wonderful.
Right.
Yes.
But the important one is that it's the archaeologist's daughter. It's the daughter of the archaeologist from the first one who comes in, and she's found more pages of the evil book. And these just happen to be the ones that will, banish the demons in space and time. So they have to try to do that before the demons kill them all. And what's interesting is, and Sherry, you can kind of tease out, I think better than I can, what kind of books they're calling on here. But in H.P. Lovecraft, since so much of this is Lovecraftian, with the isolation, with the madness, with the crazy monsters warping reality, and then with this book name, is that in H.P. Lovecraft, it was never that. It was never a book of spells. It never had power. The Necronomicon was always just basically the notes taken by a guy as he was being driven insane. The Necronomicon was just a book, and the entities that it referred to didn't get any power from it. It's just that if you read it, you went crazy because then you knew they existed, and that broke your fragile reality. And what's funny is the Necronomicon in Lovecraft would be the kind of thing that like Ash Williams would write if he were writing a journal about all the crazy crap that was happening to him in these movies. And it's not a book of spells. So where is this idea about the book? Kind of what's the reference in name is to the Necronomicon, and that's pretty funny. But that's not the right reference. What's kind of more of a book of spells that they're using for these movies? What are they calling on for that?
Well, that's more similar to a grimoire, but I think that's just a simple matter of confusing the two, to be honest. Yeah. Or kind of like taking the two and creating their own thing with their own version of the Necronomicon. And grimoires, if you think about the really dark version of the grimoires in popular culture, they're the ones that are bound with human skin and written in blood and blah, 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 blah. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that might be referencing as far as being a book of incantations and spells that could, release the demons and bind them as well. So that's what I'm thinking of.
And so the book itself is kind of is chaotic in the same way everything else is. Why is it called the Book of Dead Names of Dead People of Dead Names dead people? No reason. Why is it called Necronomicon when it's really a book of spells? No reason. Why is it bound in human flesh?
Cool, that's why.
Yeah.
Say again, Lindsay. I'm sorry.
Because it sounds cool. That's why.
Yeah. And they just kind of went with it. So I kind of like that. I kind of like the Necronomicon. And then in the first movie, it can be burnt, but then it can't be destroyed, but then they need to use... The rules just change all the time.
Yeah. It's kind of like the vampire, the rules just always change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different for every vampire.
Yeah.
But this is funny because it's in the same series and they all come in order.
Yeah,
And it just changes because this is what we want to film now. It's cool.
because they can.
And going back through here, the only name that really stood out to me as far as cast and crew was that this is one of Greg Nicotero's early films that he did makeup effects for. And now here he is today producing The Walking Dead, probably one of the biggest shows on television.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to say which was more difficult because that's the thing is that the effects in this movie, I mean, it's hipstery to say, oh, effects were better when they were practical. You know, it's not like today when everything's CGI. I mean, they can do amazing effects today that no one ever could. And, you know, hardworking, creative people are making cool things. But you go and look at things like Evil Dead 2, where it's just so... They push these effects so much to the limit. You've got the deer head that talks. You've got the animated hand that's possessed in the same scene. You've got all of these things, and they just feel so real, and they feel so icky, and they feel so present. That, I don't know. I'm going to be a big hipster. These were good. These looked great, and they really added to how surreal everything was. That the actors are there with the effects, and the actors are really covered in blood. That's real, you know, fake blood. And they're really punching the puppets that are actually there. And that when, as I was going to say, when the girlfriend zombie attacks him in the woodshed, that's my favorite part because you've got this crazy...
Yeah, this killer Muppet.
Model just dry humping him against the wall and like WrestleMania body slamming Bruce Campbell against the wall, flailing its arms while the head in the vice, you know, the actress has obviously got her head through a hole in the table and that's all it is. But hell, it's amazing. Because the actress is there to cackle at him with her disembodied head, while the puppet is there with its headless body to just whack the crap out of him. And it's one of the greatest. It's just pure joy seeing Bruce Campbell get the hell beaten out of him by a headless woman whose head is the wife nearby laughing at him.
And when they had to wear those sclera lenses that made their eyes completely white, but also made them completely blind in return. It's like,
those lenses are notorious for doing that too, blinding the people who have to wear them for whatever scenes.
Oh, these are the ones with the possessed people. When Bruce Campbell got possessed, he was blind during those scenes.
Yeah, he had to work blind.
Pretty much, yeah. So yeah, they're very frantic and spastic because they can't actually see. I think that's more of the effect of the contact lenses than it was
right.
Yeah,
totally.
Acting direction. It's like
I have Evil Dead 2 on DVD, and so there's a featurette on there with like Greg Nicotero, Howard Kurtzman, the other makeup effects artist that he worked with, and they showed that Bruce Campbell's hand had to be guided by Sam Raimi to get it to where it needed to be in order for the scene to work when he was wearing those lenses.
Wow,
I believe
it. Yeah,
and I do recommend the DVD just because the audio commentary on there with Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, Greg Nicotero, and the co-writer Scott Spiegel, they're basically making fun of the movie as they watch it. It's like this MST3K, but with the actors who actually made it.
Wow,
that's funny. But those contact lenses were like one of my favorite parts of the makeup and the effects.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so creepy and so weird. And like, you know, usually when you see contact lenses like that, they're usually black. So it was a nice, like, weird surprise that they were just white. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that nice kind of cataract-y effect.
Yeah, and like this white, milky look to it was like awesome.
Yeah, and the way that they kind of got into that was maybe the way that they combined the Looney Tunes spirit, the Three Stooges spirit, with the horror spirit the best, was that they kind of Bruce Campbell deserves a lot of credit for this, and I think that this is why he became kind of an icon over this and he was able to carry all of these movies, is because he's pushing himself so hard, and he is mugging and flailing and falling downstairs and beating the crap out of puppets and screaming and going crazy, and he's giving it his absolute all so that he can keep up with these effects. Because the effects are bending bodies, you know, they've got the the possessed. Who was it that was possessed in the cellar?
Oh, that was Henrietta,
The
the professor's wife, played by Sam Raimi's brother,
Oh.
Ted Raimi. So yeah,
Really?
Ted Raimi went through hell when he was in that costume. Like, I think he almost had it as bad as Bruce on this movie.
Yeah, I'd believe that because it's such a costume, and he's playing this bloated, decayed corpse of this older woman who was possessed way back even before the first movie, and she comes out of the cellar as this undead monster, and she keeps transforming into things. She gets this big, wacky, long neck. She gets this big, grinning Looney Tunes mouth, and starts screaming, "I'll swallow your soul! I'll swallow your soul!" And she flies around, and it's disgusting, but it's also wacky, and that's what Bruce Campbell is keeping up with. And then when the deer head is cackling, and as you said, Mac, the lamp is, they get the most scene you ever possibly could out of shooting a lamp going up and down.
Yeah.
The camera's going crazy. They're doing a demonic Popeye laugh, and they're just waving a lamp around, and yet it just sticks with you. And when the house is going crazy like this, and when the monsters are going crazy like this, the fact that Bruce Campbell is enough of a vaudeville crazy person to keep up with this is kind of what makes the whole thing work, and it kind of merges these worlds of gory horror and Looney Tunes slapstick into Evil Dead.
All right, I guess we can go ahead and end this one the same way we did with the last one. Most memorable scene, or the scene that you walked away from this movie having as your favorite?
I would say.
Yep, go ahead, Lindsay.
I would say the headless girlfriend dancing, that claymation thing that we were talking about before. That was creepy.
That will stick with you, yeah.
But also, I'm going to revise my answer and say the ending.
Yes.
Because I was like, that was another thing that just totally threw me off. I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? Like, I am like, peace out, people, because I don't know. Like, I'm gonna need Mac's help on this because I don't know. So that's my revised answer, is the ending.
Okay, that's a good one. That is a good ending.
Yeah.
Because what? Because
and I think we can hopefully sort of answer that question, even if the answer is no reason at the beginning of the third one. But I've already put my cards on the table. It's when the headless zombie girlfriend attacks Bruce Campbell in the shed, and her head is in a vice, cackling and making fun of him while he fights it. It's just perfect.
And what would you say would be yours, Sherry?
Mine, it's one we didn't actually talk about, but the beginning when after the girlfriend dies, and when
he tries to escape across the bridge.
When he's out in the woods and he's being kind of possessed, tormented, whatever. He's flying through the woods with his head snapping around, and I just thought that the camera work on that and the effects and however they shot that was pretty damn impressive. Because it definitely, I remember watching and going, whoa.
Yeah, and just that very subtle 360 shot when Ash finally starts coming to, and they do that 360 around the woods was beautiful. Very good shot. And
so I think that really kind of stuck out.
Yeah. And my favorite is another one we didn't discuss. It's the chase from the bridge back to the cabin. That ends with Ash cleverly hiding in the basement, and that's how he avoids the creature that's been chasing him almost the entire time, all the way through the cabin. It's just that chase sequence is wonderful. Yeah, and the way he drives his car, he reverses his car, and the flying squirrel monster chases him backwards all the way through that trail. Yeah,
pretty cool.
Very
good
cool.
driving there, Tex.